John McAllister with my podcast Around the State. Today, I feel very, very fortunate to have as my guest Jimmy Burrows. And Jimmy Burrows first met him when he was an assistant at Ohio University. I helped him with recruiting, and he helped me, and we worked together. And really excited. And of course, Jimmy Burrow. Jimmy is also the and Robin are the parents of Joey Burrows, who set the world on fire a couple of years ago, and now he's playing with the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm excited to have him, and we'll ask him. It's not the Joey Burrows story, so we're going to ask him and talk about all different kinds of types of recruiting and things like that. So, looking forward to it. See you soon. Mr. Jimmy Burrows, how are you doing today?
I'm good, John. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
You're retired Ohio University football coach. Okay, let's talk. And I'll mention Joey Burrows' dad, but let's talk about briefly about what you have done and where have you been. I mean, I know you played at Nebraska. I think
Okay.
you're
Yeah.
from Nebraska, and you came to start with Ohio University.
Okay.
Uh,
I can
and,
give you a
go
brief history. I actually grew up in Mississippi, signed with Nebraska, played there, drafted by the Packers, played 1 year. Then I went to the CFL and played 5 years, and ended up going to graduate school during my career in CFL at Washington State. Got a master's there, and about the time I retired, they had a job open, so I coached Washington State, and then I went to Iowa State, then Nebraska, North Dakota State. Uh, Let me back up a minute. I was head coach at Ames, Iowa High School, and coach of the Barnstormers with Kurt Warner. And then from North Dakota State, joined Frank Solich at Ohio and coached the defensive coordinator for 14 years. So retired about 3 years ago to go watch Joe's games his senior year at LSU.
Sounds good. I think that was a program script right there, I think. Okay.
Well,
What?
I do have my memory still, John, so I'm good.
Oh, good. And we've been friends a long time. And let's talk real quickly about OU. How long? 14 years. And I think that's what's huge for me is you really got to know the state and recruiting wise. And what area did you cover?
Most of the time, I had the Dayton area, Miami Valley. That included Springfield and the surrounding area. I
Right.
did cross over into Cincinnati when we started position recruiting, and spent some time in Cleveland position recruiting. But my sole area that I was responsible for all positions was the Dayton area.
Right. And I think the unique thing about Ohio recruiting is you take some guys that are pretty good prospects, 6'1", sometimes linebackers, and you got the guy from Elida who had a great career. You got Jordan Thompson from Parkway that probably half the state doesn't know where that is. They had good careers. I think that's one of the things I've always respected about OU and you. And before we go on, I got to mention Frank Solich. Now, I
Yeah.
called him Frankie back in the days, but I'm sure it's Frank now because he's just a few years older than I. But when I started the business, he was an assistant at Nebraska,
Right.
and his recruiting area was Ohio and Cleveland because he's from Cleveland, I think, originally. I think. But
Yes.
anyway, and that's how I've known Frank Solich a long, long, long time. And he's a tremendous guy. He knows me now just like he doesn't get caught up in who he is. I mean, it's Frank Solich. And that's
That's
what
right. And he had a lot of success at Nebraska. I had two sons that actually played for him, so I can relate as a parent of the players that do play for Coach Solich. I was on his staff there, and now as we talked about, 14 years. But his philosophy was really, and it started at Nebraska with Tom Osborne, was that it shouldn't matter if you're a 5-star or a 4-star or 3 or 2 or 1. Yeah, you're always trying to get the more highly rated players, but it didn't really mean that much to us here at Ohio University. As you said, we didn't care who was recruiting them, who had offered them. We just had our standards that we went by, and when we evaluated film and the guys at camps, if they checked the boxes for us, we offered no matter what, and it's really paid off. And since I've been here, and it was just, that philosophy comes really from Frank Solich, and we've had a lot of success with it.
That's really good. Now, my 2 cents on 5 stars, and there are gifted athletes. We know that, but I also wonder sometimes that's just somebody's opinion on 5 stars and 4 stars. That's not necessarily the top recruiting coordinators in the country or evaluators. That's just some people's opinion. And that always amazes me. Of course, I guess I was guilty of doing that too, but I always thought there was more to it than physical talent. Okay.
There definitely is. I mean, when, part of our standard operating procedure was to get as much information on the student athlete as we possibly could, talking to counselors, talking to friends, coaches, and certainly athletic ability has a lot to do with it. And nowadays with the camps, as you know, John, you can really zero in on a lot of that athletic ability more so than ever. But yeah, it's not just height, weight, and speed. Put it that way.
Exactly. I just this past spring or summer and spring, guys will say, well, how do you evaluate that? What do you think of this prospect? And I said, I haven't talked to him yet. And they just looked like to me like I just got off the boat or something, I said, I haven't talked to him. And I really think you have to talk to him before you put your foot out there, your comments out there and things like that. It's good.
There's no doubt that, when you're talking to someone, and that's why this pandemic, I was fortunate myself, I think, to not have to go through that, but not being able to see them in person and, really see their eye contact, see their mannerisms, see how nervous they are talking to you, and how respectful they are of coaches, and, while you're talking one-on-one. So that's been a big part, I think, of the coaches. They've missed out on that the last year or so with the pandemic, but now hopefully they can get back to, one-on-one conversations in person.
I'm doing these podcasts now. It's funny you say that. I had a parent tell me, boy, it's really good because he just can't talk in front of people.
Well, I mean, that's just part of the whole evaluation process. It's not totally, a finality when someone's like that. Just like when you find out players, how do they learn? Is it visual? Can they study written material, or does it have to be on the field? And everybody learns differently and reacts differently, and you just have to put it all together as a coach and recruiter.
Exactly. And I think there's so much to be said about watching a kid perform. I remember watching a quarterback, probably 6 years ago now, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I watched him, and he threw that football all over the place. And I think he's still probably mad because I wrote some bad things about him because of the sideline. But he was a tremendous athlete, and I remember talking to him later. And
John,
when they come off the bench, I watch them when they go on the field. They come off the field. If I'm in the sideline, I really watch it pretty closely, especially the really, really whom John McAllister thinks are really potential good ones, because I want to know all about them. But,
well, you were one of the first to really, I think, be sold on Joe, and we've always appreciated that. And I do remember you being an honest evaluator, and I think you even went to the Convo here at OU to watch him play basketball in a
basketball
regional final. And I loved watching guys in multiple sports, not just football. Basketball was an easy evaluation of a lot of different things, demeanor, emotions, athletic ability, and it was close up more so than football. And I spent a lot of time evaluating football players on the basketball field and track also. And I even watched a few in baseball over the years too. So everybody does it differently, but that's just the way we like to do it.
I agree totally, and especially with baseball, because you can just watch how they compete and track. You watch if they have a bad throw. What do they do? Of course, I go way back to Mike Elston and Mike Vrabel and all those guys throwing shot and the track meets and stuff. So it's really good. Fickle in wrestling, Luke in wrestling. Okay, let's talk about Joe a little bit, and because this isn't his show, but I want to talk about him mostly. What are your thoughts if you're evaluating him? What did you see in high school? Let's just talk football and basketball. What did you see in high school that you thought, man, he's got a chance? He's got a chance. What qualities did he possess?
Well, I think the number one, and you mentioned it, was how much of a competitor he was. And that started, third grade. And then you get into the high school and the basketball and football. He was just so competitive. And he had a lot of athletic ability, but if you watched him on the football field, probably athletic ability, the ability to throw the ball stood out. But, we always talked just as a father son about leadership and being able to compete. And I thought that was very evident if you ever saw Joe, whether he was out of camp or football or basketball, just that he would compete until the very, very end, regardless of, how things were going. And he was a leader in every sport. He always, not a vocal leader. And, John, there's some guys that scream and yell and they can lead in that way, but Joe kind of led by example. And I think if you watched him and evaluated him, and especially basketball and football in person, you could see that.
Yeah, and the basketball game, I saw him. He's having trouble hitting the threes, but he drove the basket to get the kinks out and everything. But they won the game, by the way, I think.
Yeah, we thought he was going to be a basketball player. He played all the AAU till I think
wanted to be a basketball player.
Ninth grade. I think he gave it up. Maybe 10th grade, we gave up the travel basketball because he had gravitated toward football. But there for a while, we thought he was going to be a Division I basketball player. And maybe I'm prejudiced as a dad, but there was some. He probably could have played Division I basketball at some level.
Oh, I saw him play, but yeah, I'm sure he could. You're being a dad, but I will tell you because he could shoot, and
he could shoot. That's right.
I've heard scuttlebutt that he still can shoot. I've heard he still can put the ball.
They at the semifinal game, they had a basketball contest between Oklahoma players and the LSU players, and I think they were down 15 or so, and Joe was the final shooter, and I think he hadn't picked up a basketball in 2 years, and he hit 10 out of 12 threes to beat Oklahoma. So that's on video too. So it's factual. You can check it out.
I believe you, Coach. I believe you, Coach. Okay, let's go back to dads. What can you tell dads that are watching this podcast? You probably can tell them a lot, and they're probably going to take about 10% of it and listen to you. But now, obviously, you had even your older boys played. Out at Nebraska. But tell me, how as a dad, how did you relate to Joe as a dad?
Well, I think we got him involved in all sports. We didn't specify one or the other. We didn't say, Joe, you're gonna play basketball and that's it. Matter of fact, if I'd have said that, if somebody would have made me choose for Joe at an early age, I would have said basketball, and that's not a good thing because he would have never became what he is as a football player. So we encourage multiple sports. You know, I think I would critique him at times, but not to the point where I think he ever really dreaded after a game. You know, me saying a few things, and I didn't do it all the games. So you try to be as a dad, and you know, my wife Robin, she spent a lot of time with him too when I wasn't around. But being positive, you know, teach him to respect teachers, teammates, coaches, and then have fun, and not be one of those parents that pushes them to the point where, hey, I don't want to play baseball anymore, and I don't want to play basketball. And I've seen that, and you've seen it too, John. So just be encouraging, and I think it's important. You know, I'm a big advocate of multiple sports, as especially as the young girls and boys grow up, and then you find out maybe what's best. And even in high school, like Joe didn't. He didn't enroll early at Ohio State because he wanted to finish his basketball season there in the second semester. So, as I said, just tried to be very encouraging and positive, and as a coach, sometimes that was hard to do, John. So, but I had to kind of, you know, sometimes just try to be critical, but in a positive and encouraging way.
But you were also very aware of that. I think that's, you know, very aware of not being overly critical, or you didn't go up to him right after a football game that they got beat in and start criticizing. I mean, people have to use good judgment. I've seen
That's
all
right.
kind of crazy things with dads and moms. You know, after a tough game, they get beaten. The dad's up there just grilling them almost. I'm going,
Yeah.
what are you doing, man?
Well,
You're crazy.
and two, there comes a point in time where, you know, you have to trust the coaches, and uh, especially when he got into junior high and high school football, you don't want to do anything as a parent, whether you're a coach or not, that kind of steps on the toes of those coaches, and you're telling them one thing and the coach is telling them the other thing. Uh, you know, there's a fine line between, again, uh, teaching things that you know, once again, whether you're a coach or a parent, and then not letting it affect you know, their opinion of their coach. And
Right.
so we were always we would defer to the coaches, you know, for the majority of the criticism and the teaching and coaching, and once again, I've been through the opposite end of that, even at high school, especially, and somewhat in college, that, you know, a parent is telling them one thing, and then I say, why are you doing it this way? Well, you know, my my dad said that I'm supposed to do it this way. Well, that's not a good thing, and it never works well in a relationship.
That's really good. And I think that's, and let's just talk one thing. I'll probably, because I'm prejudiced, because I saw him and I liked him. And I think one of the things I told him after the game, and we didn't talk very long because, you know, just didn't. And I said, make sure you develop your core muscles. And I
Hmm.
remember telling him that. And I think it's huge. And he has, and it wasn't because of me, but he has developed core muscles. And then
Yes.
the other thing is, and we're not going to get into this because Joe answered this once. I saw him on some podcast. I think it was Dave Lapham's. And he said, you have to ask them that, because Dave was talking about Ohio State, and we won't get into that. But I'm really around, and I think two things. I think his ordeal at Ohio State proved how tough he was, and I think also people questioned his toughness. If you watch the state championship game, and this is my last joke. We'll go to something else. You watched the state championship game, and I said, I'm worried that Toledo Central Catholic will just beat the crap out of those guys. And he did, but he came back. He just kept coming back and throwing, knocked down. And I think I've heard someplace where he said that was the worst loss of his life. He said,
There's no doubt. There's no
oh,
doubt. And but
he's
you know, the one thing that we were the most proud of after that particular game was that Coach Meyer, somebody asked him what he thought of Joe in that game, and he said the thing that he was impressed with the most about the Central Catholic game is how Joe handled his press conference afterwards. And that was a tough thing to do, but he did respect his teammates and the opposition and the coaches, and so that's a tough thing. But toughness, it's huge, and I don't think, even though maybe some people did, if you'd ask any coach that had him in high school, junior high, or any teammate, they would find that hard to believe, but it did happen. And one thing else about the core, and I think this is important to know, even for quarterbacks. So Joe, everybody knows he hurt his knee, and in his rehab, and he continues to do it. A lot of it has to do with his hips and his core and his thighs to help stabilize his knee and get his knee back to equal strength with his other ones. And I don't think he knew this was going to happen, John, but all of a sudden the velocity on his throws have increased quite a bit. And if anybody followed the mini camp and the OTAs of the Bengals, all the receivers were talking about that, and that's a direct correlation with how much work he's done on his core and on his hips and thighs. So you've always had a point about that, and it's been true.
Well, we'll talk to high school quarterbacks. It's so hard for them to believe. And then one other thing with that, for quarterbacks, I'm not a great believer in the bench press and all these things, getting all these big muscles, because to me, it tightens them up. I mean, it's good, but I don't get over crazy because I think it makes you stiff up in here some. So I think it all goes down. Okay, let's get away from that. Let's talk. I'm going to finish here. I always love these, but let's talk your perspective, Jimmy, on what do recruits need to do now? July 9th, what do recruits, if you're talking to your son, not Joey, but Joe, but if you're talking to your son, what does he need to be doing now?
Well, I was a high school coach, so that's I certainly know what I told my high school football players, and that was to work as hard as you possibly could to get bigger, stronger, and faster, but not to be obsessed with it. Have some fun in the summer. Sometimes I think kids get too wrapped up and maybe too much into weights, like you said, and too much running. But they have to do it. Have to be ready to be at the peak performance for camp. And so you got to, if you're a receiver, you got to catch balls. If you're a quarterback, you got to throw. If you're other positions, you got to work on your agility and things like that. You can't just spend all your time in the weight room. And I think that's and I use Joe an example, probably always will, but even now he spends an hour or two on the field and an hour or two, with his rehab in his weight room, strength coach. So, the camps, as you know, you're probably going to ask me about camps. I think camps are good. It gives coaches a chance to see coaches at all levels, but you can't burn yourself out like 5 camps, 8 camps. You got to pick the ones that realistically you have a chance to catch the eye of a coach at whatever level. And I think that's where high school coaches have to get involved and be realistic in their assessment of what level a young man can play.
I always think of quarterbacks, even now, bragging about how many camps they went to. Well, that arm can only last so long. And I said, those college coaches don't care that you've been in 6 camps.
No.
They want to be able to put RPMs and things like that on the ball. So, and I think that's really good. What about a mental approach to it now? Right now, I'm talking about July. How should they start developing a mental approach to it?
Well, I think you got to mentally prepare yourself to be able to put in the time that's necessary. being an athlete is not easy at any level. And then at high school, you still got to make sure you stay on top of things in the classroom. You got to continue to do some lifting and conditioning with your coach. You got to practice. So mentally, you got to understand that it's not going to be easy, and you got to prepare yourself for that. I think there has to be some downtime in the summer to mentally help that mental preparation. It can't be nonstop from the last day of whatever sport you ended up with to the first day of fall camp. You just can't do it. So there's a thin line between being working too hard and not working enough, and mentally preparing is part of that whole process.
Good. I think we're finally getting there with thinking about, you don't go one-on-ones, you don't do the Oklahoma drill every day, you don't run gassers or anything like that every day. I think we're finally, it's okay to have water. I mean, obviously illegally, but it's okay to take breaks, and
Sure.
I see more and more of that coming.
I
But
think kids should look at their film too in the summer, which is a easy way to not being physically exerting too much energy outside during the hot
right.
hot weather. Watch film of yourself. Watch how you executed the certain plays. Self-evaluate your play last year and how you performed. And I think that's that can again help you mentally prepare for the season also.
Okay, let's talk. We talk physically, mentally. Let's talk from the recruiting perspective now. First of all, I think they got to start focusing on team, but recruiting wise, where would they be now, Jim? With that, what would they be with? Where should they be?
Well, I'm pretty sure everybody's going to some camps, which I'm big on, but it's what you put on the film really in the fall that makes the biggest difference. So anything you can do in the summer to help you, as we talked about, to prepare to have a great season is going to help you, because we all go to the camps, we all watch those camps, and we do get a lot of things out of those. You can see what kind of competitor they are, what kind of athlete they are, how they handle themselves personally. And there's a lot of times, in these team camps, you can see how they perform as a teammate. But the bottom line for us, and once again, we had a philosophy, and our philosophy was, if those camp numbers and what you saw at camp didn't translate to what you saw on the football film during their senior year or junior season, then film trumps all when it came to our recruiting.
Films don't lie. Films don't lie.
No, I mean,
I think
if a guy's 4 or 5 at the camp, and I turn on the film and I don't see that, then that number doesn't mean a lot to me.
exactly.
If they're playing fast, and you say, wow, you look back at your notes, he ran 4 or 5, and it looks like he's playing that fast. And then the competition part of it, how much of a competitor he is. The one thing, and you can see this in camps too, but everybody knows in camp that everybody's watching. But maybe on Friday night, I was big on watching. Again, was a guy on the ground too much?
Yeah.
How was his effort? Did he hustle? And those are huge things that you can see in person on a Friday night as a recruiter, and then you're going to study whether it's one game, 5 games, or every game. And that's a big part of it, is to be able to see hustle and how physical you are. And let's face it, in a camp, you can't see physicality, and but you certainly can on the film. And like you said, it doesn't lie. If a guy's not physical, doesn't hustle, then those camp numbers really become irrelevant.
Doesn't take plays off.
That's correct.
Some people do. Offensive linemen, if they're going both ways, I think they have to. But I mean, because you just, to go full and you turn around, that's tough. But you can tell if a guy's taking plays off or not.
There's no
Coach,
doubt. I mean,
I
at,
really, really,
at Ohio University, I charted every time that a guy on defense didn't bounce up and he
yeah,
laid there. And so that was the way I evaluated my own players. So when I evaluated a film, uh, if a guy was just laying there and the play's still going on and he wasn't scrambling to get back up, whether to make a block or make a tackle,
yeah.
that was a check mark against that young man.
Here's one for you, Mike. Well, first of all, two things, and I'm going to close her down. This is 30 minutes. That's
It's
crazy.
all right. I'm
But
good.
you're learning about, if people watch this, can't even know, they got to find something out of this. Two things. One, I learned a lot in 7-on-7s, believe it or not. I go to those, and there's a big one in Dayton coming up. But I learn a lot in 7-on-7s, and not you just watch kids. That's different, and watch the competitors. And then the other thing is,
I'm a big 7-on-7 proponent. I mean, some coaches don't like it. They say it's not realistic, but I think it's great to develop your skills as a offensive player and a defensive player. So we did a lot of it at Ohio University, and the 7-on-7 camps I think are good also.
all these guys say stuff like that, but they also, how many guys run tight ends anymore? I mean, true tight ends and
That's
stuff.
right. That's right. But there's athletic tight ends, and those are the ones.
I'm
Those are the ones
talking
you
about
can,
the old school guys.
and those you can see in those 7-on-7s, because most of the time they go ahead and split those guys out as receivers, and so you can continue to evaluate them there. But they still got to block, John.
Yeah, I know. I know. My last thing was, and it's happened before, but this year I was at a camp and they do the one-on-ones, the OD, and I saw a highly touted offensive lineman get lit up on the first play. And then I don't think he was expecting it, but he shied away a little bit, and that scares me. That scares me. But we won't get into.
That's another thing. If you go to these camps, you better be mentally prepared to, especially the ones with pads on. You better be ready to throw it in there and defend yourself and be in attack mode as a defensive player. I never turned anybody down because of a camp, but I definitely marked people down in a camp because of what I saw in one-on-ones, for sure.
Yeah. Well, Coach, I wish you the best for this season. You probably let's see. I bet you're going to see a couple of Bengal games.
Well, there's 17 of them, so we're going to be 17 for 17, and hopefully playoffs.
So a lot of college games.
I'm going to go try to see the Bobcats on Saturday. I want to see an LSU game on a Saturday if I possibly can, and and then I miss stopping by out here on Friday night and watching the Bulldogs at Athens, and I'll do that this year too. So hopefully we're back in full attendance mode for all of those.
I hope so. My goodness, I hope so, because it just helps everybody. And with no matter what they say in high school, if you have a good football season, that starts your whole school year. I mean, I know the other people wouldn't agree, probably, but if you have a really good football team, a record, I think that kicks off your whole school year. I think it starts off different. But I'm prejudiced to football, high school football.
Morale is important in high school, and I think you're right. That provides some good early season success is always good.
Coach, I really appreciate it. Okay, it's been a very informative talk here.
All right, thanks, John. Have a good summer.
You too.
All right, see you later.